welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 331 for the 22nd of February 2015. Richard Saunders here with you from the Blue Mountains in Australia because I'm lucky I'm visiting our reporter. You know her so well from Evidence Please, Joe Alabaster. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Richard.
Hello. Yes, I'm so happy to come up here today to visit you because we've been talking about the show, going over this week's episode, a few bits of housekeeping and things like that. And thank you for hosting the show last week.
That was an absolute pleasure. It was a lot of fun.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I hope you'll do it again sometime.
It's a possibility.
But enough of this banter, Joe Alabaster. Enough of this banter. What's coming up on this week's show? We're going to kick off with the Raw Skeptic Report with Heidi Robertson, and what a great reporter she is.
She is indeed. I'm really, really glad that we've got her on board.
It's funny now because she's known as the new reporter, and you used to be the new reporter, but now you're just the reporter.
A seasoned reporter.
Oh, sorry, a seasoned reporter. Well, Heidi, yes, she's our new reporter, the Raw Skeptic, as we call her, because her first report was about raw milk.
And she's not living it down.
No, she's not. She's actually, what an interesting report she's giving us this week. She's using her expertise in her former life as a paramedic to talk about burns.
First aid for burns.
First aid for burns and some of the weird and wacky and downright dangerous alternative remedies and treatments for burns. So, folks, some good advice coming up at the top of the show with the Raw Skeptic and the Raw Skeptic Report with Heidi Robertson. And after that, we chat with Dr. Steve Roberts, also known as Dr. Bob from Dr. Bob's Trivia Quiz. Steve's going to give us his insights and opinions on psychics in the movies and on TV. Have you ever seen those psychic shows like Medium, Joe?
I have indeed. I've also seen a reality TV show which involved some psychics.
Oh, no.
And there was some guy on it.
Oh, yes.
His name?
I tried to watch an episode of that, but I had to give up, honestly. I don't know.
Absolute rubbish.
Oh, dear, she's got me. We'll find out more from Dr. Steve Roberts coming up a little bit later on. And then what's next after that, Joe?
I'm getting an RiAus Week in Science.
With Dr. Paul Willis this week.
Dr. Paul Willis.
Week in Science from RiAus, always a popular segment. Then to round off the show, I chat to an interesting skeptical guy in the UK, Ash Pryce, who's touring the UK this year with a show about talking to the dead.
Ooh.
Yeah, ooh, that was what I said. Ooh. Yes. Ash Pryce, Talking to the Dead, his show coming up to round off this week's episode of the Skeptic Zone. Also this week, we're going to have some information about the Surf Coast Skeptic Camp in Victoria, which we wish we could go to.
Really very much wish I was going to be able to go there, yeah.
But we'll just have to hear all about it.
I hope so.
I hope so. There's a little ad coming up. There's such an active lot down there in Victoria, don't you think? The Victorian
really
skeptics in general, I mean, there's many people in many different organisations skeptical in Victoria. There's the Victorian skeptics themselves, of course, but there's all sorts of other groups down there doing all sorts of good stuff. Well, that's all from us at the moment, folks. Joe, let's run to the kitchen.
Let's run downstairs.
Let's run downstairs. Don't run to the kitchen. Actually, the kitchen's just over there. I'm at your place, so we can't run downstairs because we'll end up in your backyard. But let's run to the kitchen, get some nice pumpkin bread from the German bakery, put some cheese on top and maybe a few pickled chilies. How does that sound?
That sounds good, apart from the chilies.
While we're doing that, we hope you enjoy
the Skeptic Zone.
It's the Raw Skeptic Report with Heidi Robertson.
Hello everyone. Must say you're looking well. It's raining on and off quite heavily here, so you may hear that now and again in the background. This week my report is centred around some of the more interesting first aid treatments for burns and what is not backed up by evidence. In what seems like someone else's life now, I used to be an intensive care ambulance paramedic in Sydney. I did that for about 10 years, getting a Bachelor of Health Science in pre-hospital care in the process. And I was also lucky enough to score a gig as a paramedic for the American reality show Survivor, looking after the contestants and crew for the duration, up to 3 months on set for each location. That job took me to Brazil, Panama, Guatemala, the Cook Islands and Palau. So now I teach nationally accredited first aid courses. When teaching these courses, I come across many questions from students that are asking about alternative first aid treatments for various injuries and illnesses. This week, I'm going to report on the various interesting pre-hospital treatments I've heard for burns. Firstly, let me tell you what the Australian Resuscitation Council recommends, based on evidence, for the acute management of burns outside of hospital. The summary is as follows. Quote, "The Australian Resuscitation Council recommends that first aid should consist of cool running water applied as soon as possible after the burn injury has occurred and for 20 minutes duration, as this treatment has been shown to significantly reduce tissue damage, improve wound re-epithelialization and decrease scarring. Ice should not be applied to a burn as it has not been shown to promote healing and may in fact cause frostbite." End quote. So that is current best practice. Cool running water over a burn for 20 minutes, which reduces pain, limits further tissue damage and promotes healing. Most people do not hold the burn under running water for as long as 20 minutes, but this is the optimal time in order to have the long-term benefits just stated. The other major consideration in treating a burn is attempting to not introduce infection. Keep that in mind as you listen to the following. The earliest known records of the treatment of burns comes from the Ebers Papyrus, an Egyptian medical papyrus of herbal treatments dating to 1550 BC or BCE, whichever you prefer. In here is listed mud, excrement, oil and plant extracts on different days after the burn injury has occurred, as well as the application of frogs boiled in oil or of fermenting goat dung. In the 4th century BCE, Greek and Roman treatments included dressings infused with rendered pig fat, resin and bitumen, a mixture of honey and bran, followed by cork and ashes. And in the 1st century AD, a lotion of wine and myrrh for burns. The Greek physician and philosopher Galen in the 2nd century AD is reported to be the first to advise the application of cold water for burn treatment. So, as in history, even today, many different things are used for burns, despite the fact that we now know there is good evidence for running water and not much else. Burns can be difficult enough to treat in the pre-hospital environment without people applying home remedies prior to ambulance arrival. Let me recount a particular incident which describes how difficult a large body surface area burn can be to manage. This particular patient that myself and my partner attended had sustained partial thickness burns from neck to knees. As you can imagine, the patient was in an enormous amount of pain and distress. The priority was to get the patient under cool running water for the reasons already discussed, but because it was such a large area, this meant the shower rather than a tap. Cannulating a patient who is screaming in pain under cool running water that is soaking the both of you is no easy task, as the veins become difficult to find as a result of both the cold water and the patient going into shock. Thankfully, cannulation was successful and morphine and fluids were administered with good effect, but the patient was on the verge of hypothermia by the time we got out of the shower. Losing such a large area of skin and having it exposed to cool water for 20 minutes means that hypothermia, as well as infection, are significant complications and concerns for burn management. To avoid these complications as best you can, avoid putting the burnt area in a container or bath of cool water, as these containers are generally not sterile for starters. And if it is a significant burn, the water will just heat up around the burn, making that treatment less effective. There is some evidence in the literature that the cooler the water is, the more effective it will be, especially in the case of smaller burns where hypothermia is not a concern. Try to run the water over just the burnt area itself whilst keeping the rest of the patient warm. Avoid putting any gels or lotions on burns. Aloe vera and the like can be used for superficial burns, such as sunburn, where the skin has remained intact, and after application of water. So now to the strange alternative treatments for burns that I've come across. Firstly, butter on burns. Many in my classes report their grandmothers or mothers using this on them when they were kids. This treatment originated from a Surgeon General Friedrich von Esmach, I hope I haven't butchered his name too much, in the 19th century. He wrote a handbook on battlefield medicine and recommended that burnt surfaces should be covered with an oil, grease or butter, the idea being to seal the burn off from the air, keeping it clean and helping it to heal. There is no evidence for the healing properties of butter on burns. The coolness of the butter, if it were refrigerated, doubtful on a battlefield, may help with pain relief, but there are no other benefits known, so please do not put butter on burns. I can't go into as much detail for all the other remedies I've heard, as there are too many, and it would be a 5-hour report. However, I can say that none of the following have any evidence behind them. Here's just a sample. Toothpaste, soy sauce, cold yellow mustard, vanilla extract, mayonnaise, milk, peanut butter, raw pork fat, sliced potato, sliced tomatoes, raw onions, baking soda, sour cream, vinegar, hemorrhoid cream. Now, I'm no Sherlock Holmes, but I'm going to guess that all these remedies have been tried because many burns happen in the kitchen, and these products are close at hand. Well, hemorrhoid cream may be kept in the bathroom, I suppose, but still not too far away to apparently give it a whirl. Perhaps some of these have been perceived to be successful if they came straight out of the fridge. Again, no evidence. Water is best. Then I came across this in an online forum describing an incident with a little girl who had spilled boiling tea over her legs. Quote, I knew that tea tree oil was good for burns, and since I had some in my bag, I offered to apply some to her legs. I had to assure my friend, and especially her daughter, that it would definitely be of some help. They did not even know what tea tree oil was, so they were hesitant. But clearly anything that could help would be welcome because the girl was screaming uncontrollably at this point. We took her out of the shower and dried her legs as best we could. Then I put some oil in the palm of my hand, rubbed my hands together and rubbed the oil on her legs. For a brief moment, everything was okay, but then she started screaming like you wouldn't believe, saying it was hurting her even more. Admittedly, I was a little surprised myself because I had not experienced a reaction like that before. My friend was alarmed and asked me if that was normal. I told her I'd never seen that type of reaction, but that I thought it was because her legs were wet and her pores were open. I asked her daughter to be patient and wait, and that it would soon get better. She tried her best to wait it out, but she was unable to bear the pain. At this point, she was jumping up and down, begging us to take it off of her. I felt really bad because she was clearly in a lot of pain because of me, but I didn't really know what to do because I thought that water would only push the oil deeper into her skin. After briefly discussing it, my friend decided to try washing it off because doing something was better than doing nothing. After washing her legs off with soap, like a much welcome blessing from God, she stopped crying. 23 long minutes and she finally stopped crying. She said it still hurt a little, but that it felt much better. My friend took her daughter home and the next morning she called me to let me know that there was not a single mark on her daughter's legs. It was as if nothing happened. End quote. Again, me no Sherlock, but perhaps the 23 minutes under the shower may have contributed to this miraculous result. And now to the ever more frightening. Homeopathic first aid kits on the internet. If you don't believe me, take a look on eBay. For about $64 Australian, you can get 18 small vials of sugar pills at a 200C potency, which claims to treat the following ailments: bruises, burns, scalds, bites, stings, sprains, strains, splinters, wounds, whiplash, bleeding, shock, trauma, distress, fainting, fractures, concussion, hypothermia, chills, sunburn, heat stroke, poisoning, diarrhoea and allergic reaction. One homeopathy website describes several homeopathic preparations that they claim are useful for the acute treatment of burns. I worry if they are advocating homeopathy for burns over cool running water. Even if the preparations were water instead of sugar pills, I doubt that the amount of water in a homeopathic preparation is going to be sufficient to irrigate the burn area for 20 minutes. Here's one description of a homeopathic treatment for burns. It's called Sol. Quote, "This remedy is made from potentized sunlight. It is useful in sunburn, both as a preventative in those who are extremely sensitive to the sun, and as well curative in overexposure. May be useful reducing the amounts of UV radiation in the skin." End quote. Okay, here's the last, possibly most disturbing one, with thanks to Joe Alabaster for alerting me to this. This person calls himself the Fireburn Doctor and can be found at the website fireburndoctor.com. He comes from a group of acolytes of a Dr. Philippe Sauvage, who is easily found via Google. The claim of the Fireburn Doctor is this: free, instant burn recovery when you call or text a phone number within 30 minutes of the burn occurring. So do they rush to your house and apply some new miraculous treatment? No, this healing is claimed to be done remotely, over the phone. Information to be sent is the person's name at birth, date of birth and place of birth, or alternatively, text a picture or any photograph of the person. In the About section on the website is this. Quote, "In that computer context, I would define myself as biomatrix hacker and my technique as the way to break into the biofield's continuum or the matrix that interconnects us all with one another and with all living organisms ultimately, like a global bio-internet. Then, when an individual computer, a person, is experiencing troubles, bugs, crashes, or an accident, as for instance with a burn injury, all that I am doing is writing a specific bio program with appropriate bio algorithms to resolve and correct the problem, then hack the bio matrix to be capable to upload it. It will be then automatically downloaded to the individual computer, the person, that has experienced a crisis to fix the specific software conflict or problem." End quote. They claim to have taken away all pain and all traces of the burn of many people. However, on the main page of the website is this, quote, "Call within the first 30 minutes on your way to hospital. Free processing is in addition to normal medical procedures and is done in a minute." End quote. See what they've done there? The patient undergoes normal medical procedures in the first 30 minutes, and that is the application of water. I must also add here that a friend who once did a naturopathy degree told me that a homeopath came to speak to them one day and said that because in homeopathy like cures like, one should apply hot water to burns. Apparently even the naturopathy students were aghast at this. Before I go, I'm going to shamelessly give my first aid business a plug. I do many corporate first aid training sessions. If you have a group of 10 or more people, I'm so happy to come to Brisbane or Sydney. If you're closer to me in the Northern Rivers, I only need a minimum of 3 to run a course. Contact me at info@accreditedfirstaid.com.au or take a look at my website accreditedfirstaid.com.au. Thanks everyone. Bye for now.
Ah, summer in Australia. The sand, the sea, the surf, the heat, the scepticism. Yes, the great ocean road skeptics from the far south coast of Australia are bringing back the Surf Coast Summer Skeptic Camp for the 4th year in a row this year. This is a grassroots skeptical event in a small community hall in Aries Inlet, one of the most gorgeous seaside villages on the Great Ocean Road. It's even got a lighthouse and everything. This is a free event and lunch is provided. It's an easy day trip from Melbourne, or you can make the most of the beautiful location and spend the whole weekend soaking up the natural beauty and world-famous beaches. You can join us for a relaxing dinner with other skeptics at the local pub when the Skeptic Camp is done. Details can be found on our Eventbrite booking page, or you can find our listing on Skeptic Groups of Victoria Facebook page. If you have a talk you'd like to give or any other questions, just use the Contact Organiser button on the booking page to send an email and we'll be back in touch with you. In previous years, we've had group discussions, videos and talks on topics ranging from alternative medicine to local UFO mysteries. So why not wander over to our Eventbrite booking page at Surf Coast Summer Skeptic Camp 4 and let us know you're coming. We look forward to welcoming you on the 28th of February in Aries Inlet.
The Skeptic Zone is brought to you by Dr. Bob's Trivia Quiz. Visit drbobsquiz.wordpress.com and see if you can match wits with Dr. Bob.
Well, I'm here once again with Steve Roberts, otherwise known as Dr. Bob from Dr. Bob's Trivia Quiz. Steve, we're just talking about movies. We're a big fan of movies, of course, good movies, but paranormal movies and psychics in movies. What's your take on that?
Yeah, look, I think actually this is a cause for a lot of belief in psychics. That when a movie shows somebody predicting the future or with some kind of gift,
yeah,
you have to know that movies are fiction.
Yeah.
And a psychic says, there'll be a big disaster and only one will survive. And the viewer sort of pockets this information and the plot proceeds.
Yeah.
And later on there's a big disaster and only one survives. And if in fact two survived or there was no disaster, that clip with the psychic would have been a waste of the audience's time and not put in. So this happens in Moby Dick, in fact, exactly this, that the protagonist, Ishmael, is hoofing around looking for a ship to sail on, and somebody pulls him aside and says, don't go on the Pequod, no, not on the Pequod, the Pequod will founder, and only one shall survive to tell the tale. And he thinks, I'll blow that, I'm going on the Pequod anyway, and sails off on the voyage, and of course the damn thing sinks, sunk by the whale, and only he survives to tell the tale, thus making it true. Otherwise, why put that in?
Why put it in?
But now the audience thinks, okay, the psychic was correct.
Yeah, well, and in TV shows too, specifically about things like Medium, the show about a psychic. So, of course, it's written that she can see mystical things and get messages from the dead.
Well, the audience wants to see a mystical thing seen then.
They do.
You've told
and
them
a lot of people think, when they're watching a show like that it's based on reality, and this is more or less a dramatisation of real events.
Well, a lot of people conflate real-life psychics with the movie psychics that you see who are always right.
Yeah.
So you pop up and say, I'm a psychic. And people think, actually, the psychic in the film was right every time.
Yes.
And so on. And some things are...
based on a true story. That's what kills me, But like, what's the famous haunting? It just escapes. The Amityville Hollow.
Amityville Hollow.
Based on a true story. That's right.
Well, it was true that there was a bit of a scam in the house involved. There was a bit of a shenanigan here and there, but the people who bought the house after the movie one moved out found nothing wrong with it at all.
Yeah, you can probably get it cheaply now. I don't know.
In all plots of fiction, somebody predicts something, and usually it comes to pass in some ironic way.
Yeah. Otherwise,
there's one horror movie where somebody had his head cut off. There was a vision. There was a photograph of somebody with a line across, cutting his head off in the photo by accident. And we thought, I bet that guy gets his head cut off. and sure enough, he's walking down the street thinking, must avoid sharp things, and a lorry carrying a sheet of glass crashes and the sheet of glass flies off and slices his head off.
Oh, boy.
And you think, it was true.
It was true.
The prediction's true. But you see, if they hadn't shown that, if that wasn't in the film, that picture with the head lined off would have been a waste of time.
And on the flip side, I don't know if you saw a movie some years back, 4 or 5 years ago, called The Skeptic. I actually sat through it. It was pretty dire. But of course, not to spoil the plot, people, if you haven't seen it, but it's not such a great movie. He was, I'm the skeptic. He was a bit of a stereotypical cartoon, black and white skeptic, and of course he's shown to be wrong. I mean, it's so predictable.
Oh, well, if you're shown to be wrong, the best thing is to fess up and say, yeah, okay, I was wrong.
But in showing him to be wrong, the movie makes some supernatural thing right. You see, this silly skeptic, he got his comeuppance in the end.
But they leave it. Well, in that case, there must be a ghost there or something.
Look, it's been so long since I saw the movie, and I was pretty unimpressed. But that was the gist of it.
There's a very good Woody Allen movie about a year ago on this theme.
Yes.
The guy who was a career skeptic.
That's right.
Based on
I can't remember the name
James
of it.
Randi and Richard Dawkins conflated together.
Yeah.
And he's a skeptic and he's arrogant, and he gets his comeuppance that somebody knows stuff about him, which turns out to be a plot done by his friends just to make him be wrong. But
the movie skeptics are portrayed as usually being arrogant, and they'll be wrong somehow, and they're just waiting for their comeuppance. I guess they would make a movie about someone like a Randy or whatever, where going in with a genuinely open mind, seeing what there is, but always finding thus far that claims don't live up to their promise.
Well, that's because you work in a field of preposterous claims.
We do.
If we worked in a proper scientific field of scientific type claims,
that's different.
Then sometimes we'd be wrong, and you actually wouldn't pontificate on those claims. You'd look for evidence instead. But if somebody says, "I can bend spoons," the first question you would ask is, well, can we see you do it? And that comes to reply, I can't do it if there's a skeptic in the room, or I can only invisible spoons or something.
Or only when cameras aren't running. Which is a true excuse I heard. I went to a paranormal convention earlier last year, with Maynard, in fact, and one of the topics was poltergeist. And the guy seriously said, words to the effect, it's known that poltergeists don't operate when there's cameras running. Good grief.
Well, supposing there was cameras secretly running, what happens then?
They're clever, those poltergeists. They know these things.
Oh, they can see it, yeah.
They can see it.
Can they see something useful then?
I wish they could. Great to catch up with you again, Dr. Bob from Dr. Bob's Trivia Quiz, Steve Roberts, and if you Google Dr. Bob's Trivia Quiz, have a go, write in, come up with some interesting answers. And, I must thank you very much. I sent down a copy of the Vaccination Chronicles DVD to you down in Melbourne, where you're based, and you got busy and made lots of copies. Yeah, and I spawned a few copies off it and took it to a Skeptics meeting and gave them away. So it's a DVD... And it's interviews with, as you know, you made it, interviews with people who have or have not been vaccinated. The ones who have not are generally dead, so we don't see much of those. Not much. No. Stories around vaccination. And the DVD's given away free. And anybody can write the Skeptics will send them a free copy. Well, if they just go to the Skeptic Zone website, skepticzone.tv, and you can download it, can't you? Well, you can. It's free on YouTube, of course. But the DVD itself, with all the extra features, extra interviews, and many languages and stuff. You can buy it for $12. That simply covers production and postage anywhere in the world. And once you get it, then it's your job to copy it and give it away. Copy it freely. It's copyable. So. Anyway, good to catch up with you again, Steve Roberts, and thanks for coming by. No problem, Richard. Cheers.
Hey, Kenny.
Oh, hi, Tom.
Nice day at this park, yeah?
Yes, great weather.
Oh, look, a unicorn.
Unicorn? There are no such things as unicorns, silly.
Yes, there is.
No, there isn't.
Hey, guys, what are you arguing about?
Tom thinks unicorns are real.
They so are.
Let's look this up in the Skeptic's Dictionary.
The what?
How can we do this in this park? There is no computer here.
You guys probably don't know about the Skeptic's Dictionary app. Available now for iPhone, iPad, and iPod Touch in the App Store.
Wow, cool.
The app lets you access all of the great Skeptic's Dictionary articles when you're on the go. Here, let me look up unicorns.
Oh, cool. Kenny, prepare to be proven wrong.
It says here, the unicorn is a creature from fables.
Aha!
Actually, I see now that someone just dumped their ice cream cone on that horse's head. Thanks, Skeptic's Dictionary iPhone app.
Welcome to A Week in Science from RiAus, bringing you the science you need to know. They're some of the world's most active frequent flyers, clocking up more air miles than most humans. Let's fly away with some amazing migratory birds. The bird with the longest migration is the Arctic tern, clocking up an incredible 40,000 kilometres in each direction. The Arctic tern breeds in Arctic regions, including Russia and Greenland, then migrates to feeding grounds in Antarctica. They return to the north for the next breeding season, often returning to the same location or even the same colony in which they were born. This routing means the average bird travels around 70,000 kilometres per year. Scaled for size, the longest migration is by the 25-gram northern wheatear. These tiny birds can migrate around 30,000 kilometres each year from Alaska to sub-Saharan Africa and back. That's a long journey, but they do stop for rest, food and sleep along the way. The record non-stop flight was by the bar-tailed godwit, which was tracked flying without a rest from Alaska across the Pacific Ocean to New Zealand. This unbelievable flight was 11,600 kilometres and took 9 days. To sleep, the bird shut down half its brain at a time, and the energy demand was huge, losing half its body weight during the flight. Researchers think the bird navigated using the sun during the day and the stars at night, meaning they would have had to account for the rotation of the sky in both northern and southern hemispheres. And now, 4 fast facts about bird migrations. To migrate long distances, birds must be able to carry fuel. But fuel capacity reduces with body size, so most migratory birds are less than 1 kilogram in mass. To minimise drag, migratory bird wings are generally long and slender and their body streamlined. Birds can navigate using the sun and stars, but also the magnetic fields of the Earth and the terrain and layout of the land, and even smell. Migratory birds are starting to be threatened by development along their migration paths, reducing food and shelter. That's it for this A Week in Science. For more information on bird migrations, fly over to the RiAus website, riaus.org.au. Follow us on Twitter at RiAus and like us on Facebook. I'm Paul Willis, and we'll catch you next week.
And joining me now from that wonderful city up there in Scotland, a place I love to visit when I can, Edinburgh, it's the skeptical entertainer Ash Pryce. Hello, Ash.
Hi, Richard. How are you?
I'm really well. How's Scotland these days?
A little sunnier than you might expect for this time of year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's quite bright and shiny. I actually went out with sunglasses on the other day. I know, it's a sign of the end times.
It is. That sounds a bit spooky, and we can use that as a really bad segue to talk about your upcoming tour, which is called, and here's a title for you folks, How to Talk to the Dead. What can you tell us about this bizarre-sounding show?
Well, talking to the dead is itself quite an easy thing to do. Getting them to talk back is where the problem comes in. And that's very much where this show comes in. And it's going to be looking at mainly Victorian and early 20th century spirit and mediumship communication. It's going to be looking at the history of that. It's going to involve some practical demonstrations and quite a lot of audience participation. So it's kind of a mix of a skeptic's talk with entertainment, magic and comedy.
Good heavens, that sounds fascinating. And so it's basically, is it a comedy show? Is it entertaining? Is it educational? How would you describe it?
It's kind of a mixture. I originally, when it was first created, it was very much a very straightforward skeptic's talk on the debunking of spirit communication. And it's kind of developed over the past couple of years to its current form, which is very much an entertainment show with a skeptical angle. Right.
So it really is covering the history of what we call spiritualism or talking to the dead and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So you look at all that, but you also throw in a lot of other things here. I'm just glancing at your the website, which we'll get to in a moment, where you're talking about the show. So you cover such things as Ouija boards and spirit slates and spirit communications. Stopping pulses. Now, I always find that interesting. Do you do something like that in the show, huh?
I do give it a demonstration, yes. There are reports of many fakirs performing stop pulse demonstrations. So I mix that in with my ectoplasm demonstration. So I kind of give this little routine where I say I'm going to bring forth some ectoplasm. I need to go into a trance to do so. So someone can come and join me on stage. If you could take my pulse, please, and I'll allow myself to go into this trance state. And I can bring up the ectoplasm. So that's where that part comes in.
Good heavens. That sounds like it's that should be a quite something to see. What's the reaction you get when you do this sort of stuff? I mean, are the audiences generally with you? Do you get some people in the audience who are horrified, or do you get people complaining bitterly about what you're doing?
I've never had anyone bitterly complain because the show's had its life on the Edinburgh Fringe. It means that the audience, potential audience coming to see it, is a little wider than what I've had when I do a normal Skeptics in the Pub show. So I've had a variety of different people come in, and you can always tell who the believers in the paranormal are, because there's one specific point in the show where they always get up and leave, and it's the point where I call people on stage to do a Ouija board demonstration. And
oh, really?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I've had people leave quite a few times at that exact moment in the show. I first time it happened, I thought, oh, am I doing something wrong here? Am I not being entertaining enough? And then when it starts to happen at the same point in several different shows, I kind of realised, that's what's happening there. It's the Ouija board, because people still do actively believe that the Ouija board is a very dangerous and deadly device, and that's something that's kind of been spread by the Christian Church, that the Ouija board is this satanic way of communicating with the other side, and you're letting demons and demonic forces through, and you are in danger if you use it.
Good grief, because in fact, if I look behind me on the cupboard here, I've got my very own Ouija board, which I don't get out often, I must admit. But a couple of months ago, listeners to the Skeptic Zone will remember our reporter Maynard and our friend Alethea and myself went on a ghost tour to a graveyard where the organisers were busily poring over the Ouija board. And it was a fascinating experience, I must admit. But as you and I know, we certainly know the science behind the Ouija board and the ideomotor action. But I'm a little surprised that people would actually walk out in fear, I wonder.
Well, that's it. I mean, I've only really been called out by someone once, and it was a woman who was a spiritualist, and she did, while I was giving the demonstration, I was explaining the ideomotor effect, I was explaining how it happened. She started laughing, and she very loudly and vocally called out that no, it is genuine, it is real, I have seen it. And obviously, because I'm in a show environment, I don't want to get into an argument or a debate. I'm happy to kind of address people's concerns and people's criticisms, but she was very, very vocal on it. But to her credit, she did stay until the end of the show. She didn't tip, though.
She didn't tip, but did she tip a table? That's the question.
Unfortunately, I don't actually include table tipping in this. I do a table levitation routine, but that's for a demonstration purpose. I did consider including table tipping, but the show was starting to get too long, so there are things I really did want to include in the show that I've not been able to, that I kind of cut back, otherwise it turns into a 90-minute show. And I want to try and keep it to just under an hour.
Ah, right. Well, that's understandable. So it sounds like you do cover a lot of bases in there. Do you sort of bring it up right up to date and talk about the modern phenomenon of the stage psychics who talk to a huge audience and somehow look like they're contacting the dead?
That really depends on how quickly the show's going. I did originally have it scheduled as a part of the show. I looked at things like cold reading and hot reading and on-stage demonstrations. But because of where it has to go in the show, it has a habit of sometimes interfering with the flow.
Interesting.
Yeah, because it's a section that needs to go towards the end, where I do talk a little bit about modern spirit communication very briefly, mainly things like EVP and some of the ghost hunting devices that I used. So in that section I did talk a little bit about spirit communication on stage in a more modern setting, but I found that it started to detract from the overall flow, and so I kind of keep that back for if there's a Q&A, I can kind of go into it a little bit more in detail then.
I suppose, in a sense, that could be its very own show one day, based on the more modern methods.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I do include a lot more detail on spirit communication in a show called How to Be a Psychic Con Man, which is the sister show to this one,
Right.
which I'm hopefully performing again later in the year. But that I talk about it a little bit more in there because I talk about things like astrology as well and Barnum statements, and so that has a kind of a natural segue into cold reading and stage mediumship because it's kind of in that same ballpark area. So that's another reason why I've not gone into it in too much detail in How to Talk to the Dead, because I didn't want to end up doubling up for an audience.
It's interesting because a lot of people, especially in my circles, are very interested in the more modern guise of this talking to the dead, the television psychic and the stage psychic and so on. But the history of it, and especially in the Victorian era and seances, we might say, and all that sort of stuff, is so fascinating. What is it about that especially that caught your imagination?
I think it's the very theatrical nature of it. I'm a performer by trade, and so I've always been interested in performance styles, and when I started getting interested in skepticism, it was the paranormal area that really interested me the most, and I started to become interested in magic as well, and so all of that really merged together, and I found myself really very, very interested in Victorian seances and early 20th century seances and mediumship, and so that's kind of where that all came from, and it's the theatrical nature of it, and you don't really see seances like that anymore. You don't see them with a whole sat around in the dark and levitating objects and full-on spirit possessions with ectoplasm flowing out of all of the orifices, and it's just the very, very theatrical nature of it that really interested me.
Yeah, I think ectoplasm has sort of had its day as a fad, don't you?
Yeah, I think it was popular in the 30s and 40s. It was quite popular. I think the last well-known medium to really employ it was Helen Duncan in the 1940s. But yeah, there was a very, very short period of time. I think it's because people very, very quickly discovered how it was done and got easy methods of communicating it by the 30s and 40s. So I think it kind of disappeared very quickly, which is just, from a performance aspect, is a bit of a shame because it's actually a wonderful, if disgusting, thing to see.
And Edinburgh is such a wonderful place, so full of history, and there's so many good skeptics up there. What can you tell me about the skeptical scene in Edinburgh generally?
It's very, very active, actually. Edinburgh Skeptics was the first skeptical group of the modern age, anyway. That was started in Scotland. I started that back in 2009. Quite active for a few years in it. And since I've kind of stepped back as I work on more of my theatre and my entertainment side of things, it's really, really grown. They're very, very, very active. Edinburgh Skeptics alone do a lot each year. They have the Fringe each year where they do 3 full weeks of Skeptics in the Pub style talks every single day of the Fringe, which is a massive, massive undertaking. Basically doing 2 years' worth of Skeptics in the Pub over the course of 3 weeks. So there's a lot of work there.
That sounds too good to be true.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's absolutely wonderful. And we've had some great speakers going along. We've had people like AC Graylings come along to give talks for us. We've had Richard Wiseman, Chris French. A lot of people have come along. It's been absolutely wonderful. And outside of that, they have monthly meetings. There's monthly book clubs. They have a monthly discussion and debate group. They have social outings. So it's very, very, very active. And then there's a lot of interconnected groups as well. So you have the humanists, you have the student humanists, and you also have the Fortean Society, which, although dealing with more, Fortean issues, is of interest to quite a few of the skeptics. I myself, being interested in the paranormal and the supernatural, do occasionally go across to the Fortean meetings. So there's a lot to do. And with Edinburgh being the centre of the Scottish Enlightenment as well, it's just such a wonderful city. And it's great that it's so active in skepticism.
That's fantastic. Yeah, it's a lovely city. I love to visit. I gave a talk there a couple of years ago, which was just a thrill to be able to talk to the Edinburgh Skeptics. It was a wonderful place. So that's the word, people. If you're in Scotland, if you're in Edinburgh, check out the local skeptical scene there. I'll put a link on to the show notes for this episode. But Ash, I'm getting back to your tour. I'm just scanning your website once again. You're going to be a very busy entertainer. You're in Newcastle in May, as well as Cardiff, as well as Leicester, as well as York, as well as Leeds. And then in June, you're in Bath, and then Portsmouth, and then Worthing, Bedford, Aberdeen, Cambridge. It goes on and on and on.
Yep.
Where can people go to find out about your tour and to catch your show?
Well, the best place to find out about the information of the show is my website, ashpryce.co.uk. If for whatever reason that's not working, because I'm in the process of switching over servers at the moment and getting a fully functional website, you can also check out on my blog, ashleyjamesprice.wordpress.com, and that's, in both cases, it's Price with a Y. So all the information is on there, and actually there's more dates being added. There's about 3 more dates that I need to be adding to the list as it is. And it's actually it's now covering. There's a Northern Ireland date that's added, so it's covering all 4 countries of the UK. So
that's just fantastic, because as I scan down the website now, it just goes on and on and on until October. So yeah, that's really good to see. Absolutely. What a pity Sydney isn't on that list yet.
Yes, well, if we can find an easy way for me to get there, I'm more than happy to come and visit the Australian summer.
That's not a bad idea, Ash. I might have a word with a few people. But until then, Ash Pryce, thanks again for joining us on the Skeptic Zone, and all the best with the tour. And who knows, maybe one day we can see it here in Australia.
Thanks for having me.
Did you see that UFO sighting that made the news? What did that latest study about alternative treatments really say? Is this photo making the rounds real or a hoax? Doubtful News is a unique website featuring news about pseudoscience, the paranormal, anomalies, and questionable claims framed with a skeptical view. Come visit doubtfulnews.com every day for news about cryptozoology, conspiracies, shams, scams, and more. Follow us on Twitter at Doubtful News. Critical thinking is essential in assessing today's news. Doubtful News helps you decide, can you really believe this stuff?
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. Joe Alabaster, who has been my co-host this week. What a frightening report from Heidi Robertson at the top of the show.
It is frightening. It's really concerning, some of the things that people think are appropriate for treating burns.
It really is. Thank you, Heidi, for that report. Very important report, I thought. And Joe, I hope we can have some more evidence, please, from you in the coming weeks.
Well, given that you said please, Richard, I think that could be a thing, yeah. I'd just like to actually take the opportunity to say thank you to people on Twitter who've given me messages after they've listened to my reports and the Zone in general. It's really interesting to get your feedback, and I appreciate it very much.
And what's your Twitter handle, Joe?
At Joe Alabaster.
And your website is?
evidenceplease.net.
Very easy to remember, folks. And yes, thank you for your feedback. And of course, people can visit the Skeptic Zone Facebook.
And the website.
The
new website.
Which has just been revamped, www.skepticzone.tv. Check it out. It's a lot slicker. It's a lot more easy to find things on the website now. And we've added a shop. And if I might give a personal plug, it all goes to help the Zone. I've put up lots of origami posters because I've been doing origami for years. I've written lots of books about it and DVDs and things. I've made a range of origami posters featuring Pegasus and elephants and birds and all sorts of things.
My.
Sorry?
Oh, my.
Oh, you? Oh, you? Oh, my.
Pegasus, elephants, birds, oh, my.
Oh, I see. Very funny, Joe Alabaster. So check it out. You can buy those posters, and I think they look great in kids' rooms and schools and things like that. And your kids have some too.
They do indeed.
Oh, well, Joe, I'm going to have another coffee while I'm enjoying your company up here in the Blue Mountains, and then I'll have to take the train back down to Sydney.
There are beautiful views to be seen on the way down, but it is a long ride.
It is a bit of a long ride, but really enjoyable. Until next week, this is Richard Saunders and
Joe Alabaster
signing off from the Blue Mountains here in Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for contacts, an archive of all episodes since 2008, and our online store. Please support the Skeptic Zone by following us on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, liking us on Facebook, and leaving a review on iTunes. You can also show your support by subscribing via PayPal for as little as 99 cents a week. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian Skeptics Inc. or any other skeptical organisation. Then it's Dr. Bob, our good friend Dr. Steve Roberts, who's the sponsor of the show. He's going to be talking about birds.
Yep.
Cockatoos. Look at them all. Holy mackerel.
Yeah.
They're being invaded.
Oh, when they go straight over the house, it's quite amazing. So we don't get plane noise here, but we get birds.
They won't shut up.
No, they won't.
All right.
All right, to Dr. Bob.
Dr. Bob. And after that, it's Dr. Bob, our good friend Dr. Steve Roberts, also known as Dr. Bob, with